welcome to all those visiting with us online as well. I just started mentioning that I'm a little bit harried because I just came from a conference that ended late, but we're here together, so we'll learn together as much as we can. Hopefully, we'll fill up the hour with good content, or we'll end early. So what I wanted to do first is to go back a little bit and just review quickly some of the points I had made towards the end of the class last week, and then go a little bit deeper, drill down deeper into some of those paradigms, and learn with you together a couple of other texts of the Rambam, and then finally a text of the Ramban, which presents an alternate reading of the sources. So here first of all, so we're going to have two groups of sources. One of them I think Josh put online already, and one of them I'll give to him to put later online. So, so last week I started. We mentioned the fact that there is Talmudic statements there are a number of Talmudic statements, and in many ways this is kind of the default position that many people study, which is the position that every single jot and tittle of what we consider Torah Shebaal Peh, which is included in the Talmud, except for things which are clearly indicated that they were created by the rabbis as fences around the law, like muktzah and things like that, all have their origin in Sinai directly, and that these were given at Sinai. We saw the Gemara in Brachot that said, "Va'atna lecha et luchot ha'even v'haTorah v'hamitzvah," where the rabbis took every word of that sentence and said, this refers to this part of Torah Shebaal Peh, Mishnah. This refers to this part of Torah Shebaal Peh, Gemara. This refers to this part of Nach. All the details were already given at Sinai. So how come there is debate later on in Jewish history? So that is the sense that as time went on, the tradition was forgotten because of the vicissitudes of history, exile, oppression, dispersion, etc., and that the attempt is what's called in Hebrew l'shachzer, to recreate, to recapture what was the original intent of the author, i.e. God. And that's what the enterprise of Torah Shebaal Peh is, an attempt at recapturing what we had. So I mentioned that outside, I mentioned that this is the position of the Gaonim. I wanted to show you a text that says it explicitly. So if you look here, this is a Xerox, just a wonderful book by Professor Moshe Halbertal on the Ramban. So one of the chapters had a long discussion, so he has a number of interesting sources, so just easier to Xerox. The first page here, this is from a book called Sefer HaKabbalah of Rav Avram ibn Daud, Ravid, but not the Ravid on the Rambam, a different Rav, an earlier one. So he writes, Sefer HaKabbalah, Zeh Sefer HaKabbalah, in the citation, Zeh Sefer HaKabbalah Katvanu, we wrote it, Kitvinu or Katvanu, Lahodia Talmidim, to teach all of the students, Kichol Divrei Rabotenu, Chachmei HaMishnah, VaHaTalmud, Kulam Mikubalim. All of the words of the rabbis of the Mishnah and the Talmud are all by tradition. Chacham Gadol v'Tzadik, Mipi Chacham Gadol v'Tzadik, great and wise and pious righteous man, passed it on to the next generation of great and righteous person. Rosh Yeshiva v'Siato, Mipi Rosh Yeshiva v'Siato, one head of an academy and his group to the next head of the academy. Me'anshei Knesset HaGdola, shekiblu min hanvi'im, zecher kulam livracha. They all received it going back to the prophets. Ule'olam, and in all instances, Chachmei Talmud v'chol shekain Chachmei Mishnah, the rabbis of the Talmud, the Amoraim, and certainly the rabbis of the Mishnah, afilu davar katon, lo amru milibam, they did not say even one word from their own heart. It was all something that they received. Chutz minat takanot, except for the takanot, what's the best translation of takanot? A takana is what's the best translation? Legislation. They instituted an institution. Chutz min takanot shetiknu b'haskamat kulam kidei lasot siyag leTorah. So this is the nice formulation of the origin of the law, and this was the mainstream approach within Gaonic times. And we then saw that was the first paradigm. And that, as I said today, if you went on the street, you asked in Borough Park. I was just in Borough Park. I took my kids to see them making matzah. It's always fun before Pesach. If you stopped any person in the street on Borough Park, that's what they would tell you. This is the mainstream Orthodox and certainly the dominant stream within Haredi perspective. On the other hand, we saw that Rambam, in the Perush HaMishnayot, the first book that he wrote, Rambam took a very different approach. Rambam took the approach that, no, there are actually 5 categories of Torah, of what is found in the Mishnah. And Rambam, and we looked at the first 3 categories because they were the most important for our purposes. I'll just mention the last 2. So again, just to review, Maimonides said that there are 5 categories in the world of what we call the Mishnah and the Talmud. Besides the stories and the medical advice and all that interesting kind of realia, which is kind of peripheral, and agadata and the non. But if we talk about the legal material in the Talmud, there's 5 categories. Category 1 is Perushim HaMekubalim, the accepted, transmitted, authorized meaning of the text when a text needs to be interpreted. It says in the Bible, pre-Eitz Hadar, on the first day of Sukkot, you will take a fruit of the goodly tree, Ukshartem la'ot yadecha, and you shall put a sign on your arm. Vayulu totafot beinecha, it should be a totafot between your eyes. When the Bible says these things, alongside the written text, there was an authorized translation, explanation of what this word means. That is Perushim HaMekubalim. Literally, Torah Sheba'al Peh. This was given orally by God to Moshe Rabbeinu, passed on from generation to generation. And this is literally when, according to the Rambam, this is what is called D'Oraita. When the Bible says the word D'Oraita, when the rabbis, say the word D'Oraita, that's what they're referring to. This is a D'Oraita. This is from the Torah. This is the meaning of the Torah. This is the meaning of the text. The second category, Rambam says, are Halacha LeMoshe Misina. These are words that have been transmitted by God to Moshe orally that have absolutely no hint in the text. They are not interpreting a text. They don't base themselves on a text. They are a purely oral tradition alongside the written law, which has absolutely no hook in the text, no connection to the text. That is a second category of Halacha Moshe Sinai. Okay?
So we can't ask questions.
Well, the Rambam says on those 2 categories, there are no debates in the Talmud.
What was the first that you
First category is an authorized, transmitted interpretation of the text. And when you see that there's no debate in the Talmud, that's indicative of that. Now, the Rambam does note, though, that with the first category, sometimes you will find that the rabbis will debate what the source, as if there is, meaning they will debate exactly how to derive, or something like that. So Maimonides makes it very clear that is not the source of the law. The source of the law was a oral explanation of the text. When the rabbis are arguing maybe about figuring out a source text in there, they are arguing because the text, the wondrousness, Rambam uses the term chokhmat hakatuv, the wondrousness of the biblical text is such that it can yield a way to see this interpretation through exegetical means. But that's not the source of the law. Okay, those are the first 2 categories. The third category, the Rambam says, is what he calls the third category is the one that he spends the most time on, and it is the most broad part of the discussion, and that is what he calls, those are the debates that you find in the Talmud which yield law, where the rabbis disagree about law, and it's rooted in the fact that it was not transmitted from Sinai. Here the rabbis, using the 13 principles that were transmitted from Sinai, using their logic, may come to different conclusions. And that's why you have machloket. You have machloket not because people forgot the tradition, but because people are using their God-given talents to unearth ideas that may emerge from the text, but are not what the text actually means in the sense of what this word means. That's the third category. And that's what we're going to spend a lot of time talking about today, that third category of the Rambam. And then there's two more categories. The fourth category are dinim d'Rabbanan, purely rabbinic laws like Hanukkah, Purim, Natilas Yadayim. These are laws which the rabbis created. And then there are minhagim, customs, okay, things of that nature. And amongst the laws that the rabbis created, some of those laws are like holidays, like Purim and Hanukkah, and some of those laws are fence around the law to protect the law. And the fifth category is what we call minhagot, minhagim, customs and things like that emerged. But they certainly are not biblical, and they may not have even started from the rabbis, they may have started from the grassroots. So we're
like Ba'omer.
Lag Ba'omer or kissing a mezuzah, whatever it is. Now the Rambam, as I said, what the Rambam did, and again, as if I had more time, if I'd come earlier, I would have Xeroxed this for you. I want to show you what the Rambam did, how he reads his interpretation of Torah Shebaal Peh, which for the Rambam is much more limited. The literal oral law are only those first two categories. That third category, it's not oral in the sense of transmitted from God. It's the rabbi's creative right to interpret the text. We believe that they are getting to what God, so to speak, wanted. But that's not actually what this text means. It's very interesting how, given that background, when you listen carefully to a book that the Rambam wrote towards the end of his life, the Mishnah Torah, the Code, he begins the Code with a paraphrase of that Gemara I started with last week. I started with the Gemara in Brachot, Daf Hey, which said, Va'etna lecha et luchot ha'even, va'atorah va'mitzvah. And the Gemara said, what's luchot? Luchot are the 10 Commandments. Torah refers to Mishnah. The Evan, whatever, the mitzvah Torah refers to, mitzvah refers to the Gemara. Listen to how the Rambam, paraphrasing that verse, listen to the language he uses. He starts the introduction to the Code of the Mishnah Torah, a book he wrote much later in life. Kol ha-mitzvot, you don't have it in front of you, so just listen carefully. Kol ha-mitzvot, this is the Hakdamah to the Mishnah Torah, not the Hakdamah to the Mishnah, the Hakdamah to the Mishnah Torah. Kol ha-mitzvot shenitnu leMoshe b'Sinai, all of the mitzvot that God gave to Moses at Sinai, b'ferusham nitnu, they were given with their perush. What is category number 1 of the Rambam? Shenemar va'etna lecha et luchot ha'even va'torah va'mitzvah. Torah zu Torah shebichtav. Umitzvah, now in the Gemara it says mitzvah ze mishnah. That's not what the Rambam says. Umitzvah ze perusha. It's interpretation. It's authentic interpretation. V'tzivanu lasot haTorah al pi mitzvah umitzvah zo hi hanikret Torah Shebaal Peh. That and that alone is Torah Shebaal Peh. That was what was passed on orally to explain the Torah Shebichtav. The Rambam did a very cute little switcheroo on the language of the Gemara in Brachot by, so to speak, rereading it in his image. And he says the word Mishnah shouldn't be taken literally there. It doesn't mean every law in the Mishnah. It means the parts of transmitted law that are explaining the mitzvot. Okay, now that we have that, I'd like to read the Rambam's formulation, summarize the Rambam's formulation, and then look at the Ramban's formulation. And again, as I'm reading, I want to highlight certain key passages and certain key words in his formulation. So the Rambam And here, let me start again. This is a fascinating, for those who like intellectual history. There is a little passage at the end of the Gemara in Makot, Daf Chaf Bet, where the Gemara introduces Amar Rabbi Simlai, said Rabbi Simlai, that the Jewish people received 613 mitzvot at Sinai. That is the extent. Rabbi Simlai is the one who introduces this concept.
It hadn't been before.
No, as far as we know, he is the first one who introduces. So it's an Amora who introduces the concept. Now, the truth is, does it really matter if it's 613 or 1,000 or 20? I mean, so there's mitzvahs. What does it matter? It doesn't really matter. And certainly, today, it certainly doesn't matter because we're not Karaites. So who cares how many mitzvot are actually counted as... But for the Rambam, this was a very important... And he and others create a genre which kind of exists for about 300 years called the Sefer HaMitzvot genre. It's a genre of people sitting there and trying to figure out which of the mitzvot which actually are counted as 613 in the count. Now again, as I said, it's not a big deal because the truth is, if you look at the Talmud has a lot more than 613 things that we're obligated to do. Even on quote-unquote a biblical level, there's a lot more than 613. And yet for the Rambam thought it was very important. Yes, there may be things that we may be obligated in, but it's important to know which exactly are counted as explicit mitzvot in the Torah. For the Rambam, this became a very important issue. What can I count as one of the 613 that makes it into the count of things which for the Rambam are d'oraita, i.e. for the Rambam the word d'oraita meant are part of the 613. And so the Rambam creates 14 principles by which a mitzvah is in the count or is out of the count. And that's how he introduces the Sefer HaMitzvot. We're going to look at the first two categories. Okay? I'll give you some of the examples of the categories we're not going to look at. The Rambam has this category that only you don't count each detail of a mitzvah as a separate mitzvah, but you count it all as one. For example, let's say you said Sfirat HaOmer was each 49. It's not 49 mitzvah, it's one mitzvah, even if it has 49 parts. Okay, so that's a whole question. The Mishkan, do you count the building of the Shulchan and the building of this and the building as separate? Or, no, there's one big mitzvah called the building of the Mishkan, and these are component parts. So that's an interesting, again, what's the difference? No big difference. You still got to do it, but in terms of accounting, it's important. What budget item, line does it go on? So the Rambam has two very important principles, which are striking. Shoresh Rishon. And again, these are very long. I condensed the parts that I'm interested in. So I Xeroxed only a few parts that I was really interested in. Okay. So the Rambam writes, She'ein ra'ui limnot bichlal hazeh mitzvot she'ein midrabanan. The first principle Rambam lays down is that it is inappropriate, ein ra'ui, to count a mitzvah which is rabbinic. Okay? It says it is inappropriate to count that which is rabbinic. And the Rambam says, Da ki zeh inyan lo haya ra'ui lo re'olav. This would not have been something that I should have even bothered to mention. Ki achar shaya lashon ha-Talmud. After the Talmud says, Taryag mitzvot, ne'emru l'Moshe miSinai. The language of the Talmud is 613 mitzvot were said to God by God to Moshe at Sinai. Eich nomar, how can we say b'davar ha'u shehu midrabanan shu michlal haminyan? How could anyone claim that something which is purely rabbinic is part of the count? Aval he'iranu alav, we have to mention it. Mipnei sheta'u bo rabim, there were those who made a big mistake. Umanu, and they counted ner Chanukah, umikra Megillah, michlal mitzvot aseh. There were those in his day who said, look, if this is what a Jew has to do, it obviously is included in the broad canvas. V'chein mea brachot b'chol yom. There were some who counted the idea that you have to say 100 blessings every day. Nichum avelim, visiting the sick. Bikur cholim, visiting the sick or shiva visits. Kvurat metim, burying the dead. Halbashat arumim. V'chishuv tku. All these things as mitzvah. So the Rambam says that's wrong. Okay, so the first principle is, the Rambam is telling you, I come into a world in which people have very expansive notions of what should be counted as under the rubric of the 613. So much so that there were even those who wanted to say, since the rabbis were given the authority by God to make up mitzvot and to line the parameters of the system, whatever they say also comes under the status of the 613. And the Rambam says that's ridiculous. The 613 are limited to a very small category of mitzvot that fill criteria. Now he goes to the first criterion. Hashoresh hasheni she'ein ra'ui limnot kol ma shelemedim be'achat mishlosh esrei midot shatorah nidreshet bahem omei ribui. The Rambam here lays down a corollary of what we read last week. Any law which is derived by a drasha of Chazal as the source of the law is not counted as one of the Taryag mitzvot. It is not, in the Rambam's language, which we'll see in a second, deoraita. It should be called something else. It should be called divrei sofrim, derabanan, but not deoraita. For the Rambam, deoraita is a very limited technical category. It's what it says. It's the interpretation of the text of the Chumash, the Perush HaMikubal, the authentic, transmitted interpretation of a text. That's can be included in the Taryag, but everything else is rabbinic. That's what the Rambam believes, and even halacha. Well, we'll see. So the Rambam explains himself. We've already explained ourselves in the introduction to the book that we wrote in explaining the Mishnah, which we looked at last week. Here, as he says it, Sherov Dinei Torah. Most of the laws of the system, Yatzu b'shlosh esrei midot shaTorah nidreshet behem. Of the 5 categories we mentioned last week, most of the laws are derivative by the rabbinic activity, what we call drashot chazal, the exegesis of the rabbis. V'shehadin hayotzei b'midam yotana midot hinei pamim tipol bo machloket. Those laws, sometimes you will find debate about them. V'sheyesh dinim, on the other hand, there are also laws, Hein perushim mikubalim Moshe. They are interpreted. Notice he uses the same term. 50 years later, he's still using the same terminology. Very consistent. Perushim mikubalim Moshe. Authentic, transmitted interpretations from the time of Moshe. Ein machloket bahem. No debate about them. Aval heim miviim ra'aya alehem ve'achat mishlosh esrei midot. But they bring a proof through exegesis. Now, the Rambam says, you will find sometimes, this is what I was explaining before, there were sometimes that the text, that the Talmud, you will find rabbis who will derive a law which sounds like it's been transmitted through a drasha. But the Rambam says that's not the origin of the law. That's just chokhmat hakatuv. The genius of the text is that it allows for people to find hints to it. But the authentic source of the law was a perush hamikubal, a tradition of what the words mean. Ki mi chokhmat hakatuv, shehu efshar shimtza bo remez, al ha-perush, hahu hamikubal, o hakesh yoreh alav. It's part of the genius of the text that one can find hints to it. But that's not the source of the law. Ukishiyeze came, when this is true, Hinei lo kol ma shenimtza lachachamim shotziu behekesh mishlosh remidot nomar shehu ne'emar lemoshe misinai. So he says, and given that this is true, it's not always clear to determine, is this a law that was created by the rabbis through the Yud Gimel Midot? Or is this a law that they had by tradition that they just found an exegetical connection to the text. He says, it's not true. I don't know. Hine lo kol ma shenimtza l'chamisha otzi behekesh nemar al Moshe v'lo gam kein omar, nor can we always say b'chol ma shenimtza b'Talmud shismechu l'chad mishlosh rabban shu d'Rabbanan. We can't always know that. Ki piamim, there are times ya perush ahu mikubal mimoshe misinai. There are times like this and there are times like that. So the only way that we will know, says Rambam, 3 lines before the end of the paragraph, is Im be'aru heim be'atzmam ve'amru shezeh guf Torah o shezeh d'oraita. When the Gemara explicitly will state that this law is a guf Torah, it's from the Torah explicitly, or it's d'oraita, then hinei ra'ui limnoto achar shamekubalim mimenu amru shu d'oraita v'im lo yiva'aru zeh v'lo dibru bo hinei hu d'Rabbanan. It turns out to be mi d'Rabbanan. And so the Rambam is very explicit. The Rambam says, look, it's not always easy to tell if a law is actually d'oraita or it's not d'oraita in his terminology. It's not clear. And so therefore the Rambam says you have to look at the litmus test. If there's machloket, if there's a debate about the law, whether it's true, whether it's like this or like that, that's a sign that it's probably not accepted going back to Sinai, but rather it's a debate of the rabbis. That's one criterion. Second criterion, sometimes there's no machloket, and yet you'll find the rabbis have a pasuk, they don't have a pasuk. So he says, it may be that that's a perush mikubal, maybe it's not. You have to look at what the rabbis themselves say about the law. Yes?
When were the 613 mitzvot finalized, and by whom?
No finalized. 5 different books were written in the span of 200 years that disagreed about, they agreed about, let's say, 550, but then they disagreed. Because if you put in one, you got to knock out another one.
So why do we use the number 613?
We still use the number 613 because that's what the Talmud said in that Gemara. But which exactly is one of them is a big deal in the Middle Ages. Is it actually one of the 613 or not one of the 613? Doesn't mean that you don't keep it even if it's not one of the 613, but whether it fits into the criterion.
My grandfather wrote a book. He had expected to go through, but he died. And it's called Taryag Mitzvot.
Okay. Yeah. And many people, as I said, in the Middle Ages, this was a very big industry. There's a book called Sefer Mitzvot L'Rav Sadigon, Sefer Mitzvot L'Rambam. The Ramban wrote a response. The Sefer Mitzvot Gadol, Sefer HaYureim. There were people who this became a genre of literature. Yeah.
But then why do we use the number 613?
There's nothing. The number is fine. The question is, I can agree to the number, but I just don't know which ones are part of that canon. Because there are about 20 or 30 that people disagree with. Are they in? Are they out? Doesn't mean they don't keep them, but did they make it to the big leagues of being counted as one of the 613?
Yeah.
In his book, does the Rambam tell you which are the ones that are actually the Kubalim parts?
He basically gives you it because he uses that term often in the Mishnah Torah, uperusha mekubal. But when it's clear that he's not, when it's not that, he uses other terminology, like divrei sofrim, or mipia shmua, they learned this, or things like that tell you that he believes the rabbis derived this by their power of derivation. Now, what is...
How does he look to Yaminu Shmo?
No, so that's a different issue, which I wanted to get to, not necessarily today, but I'm going to... Don't confuse origin with authority. Meaning, it may be, I'll give you an example, the Rambam will even claim that rabbinic law, something which everybody agrees is rabbinic, muktzah, or Chanukah or Purim, which everybody, let's say, almost everybody agrees is rabbinic, the Rambam will say if you don't follow that, you're also in violation of lo sasur. Because, meaning, the question of violation of the authority of the rabbis is different than the question of what the status of law. It may be that the status of this law is minhag, and yet it was accepted by the community, and if you violate it now, you're violating lo sasur. Those are two separate questions. Whether it's, right, just like in regular American law. You can have a law that goes back to the founding fathers as a constitutional law, right? And you violate constitutional law. And then you can have a law that was passed 2 weeks ago, but you may get the same punishment because this is also a serious law that we hold, right? So the question of authority to enforce and the question of origin is two separate issues. So don't confuse the two. Now the Rambam goes a step further. And the Rambam now tells you what is his underlying assumption. Where does he get this? What is his philosophy of halakha, if we can use this term? So there are 2 points that are very important here to make. And he says, so he gives an example. Look at the bottom. He gives an example of a Talmudic discussion, which I'd like to go through with you and unpack the Rambam's argument. There's a very famous, I'm not going to read every word inside, but there's a famous statement, right? It says in the book of Deuteronomy, Et Hashem Elokecha Tira, and you shall fear or revere the Lord your God. That's what it says. Now, Rabbi Akiva, in a very famous statement, says, Et. Why does it say Et Hashem? Why did you say Hashem Elokecha Tira, which in Hebrew would have, what does the Et add? That's always a question. Et is one of those words that's very hard to translate. I remember when I was studying college Hebrew, my professor, who was from Israel, originally said that he remembers as a kid, Ben Gurion tried to outlaw Et. In modern Hebrew, he wanted to get rid of the word Et because he didn't think it added a lot. So again, it's interesting, right? So the rabbis have a famous comment. Et Hashem Elokecha Tira. So look at the second line of the second paragraph here in Shoresh Sheni. Says Rabbi Akiva, Et Hashem Elokecha Tira lerabot Talmidei Chachamim. The word Et comes to include that not only should you have reverence for God, but you should have reverence for scholars. That word, that pasuk, is to be taken in a much broader context. Okay? Chashav, there were those who thought, Shekol ma sheyagia mishlosh midot hu min haklal hanizkar. V'im haya inyan kemo shechashvu. So there are those who saw that showing respect to scholars was one of the taryag. They took this drasha so seriously that they said there should be, let's say, number 300 is to have reverence for God, and number 301 is to have reverence for Talmidei Chachamim.
People who are representing
Representing God's word. Okay? Or maybe under 300, it'll include 2 things. Something like that. That it's part of the 300.
What are the Shlosh Esrei Midot?
Kal v'chomer. A fortiori arguments. Hekesh. One thing is next to another thing, so I derive principles. Gezeira Shava.
Principles are avot.
Principles, yes. Principles, yes. So these are examples. Okay? Klal uprat. Ein baklal elamasha baprat. These kind of exegetical principles of how to interpret a text. Okay? The ones that are read if you go to a synagogue early, so they read right before the first Kaddish in the morning, they said, Rabbi Shmuel Omer b'shlosh esrei midot ha'torah nidreshet bahem. Mikal v'chomer, migzera shava.
So it's part of the tefillah?
We incorporated it into the
So
tefillah.
if I look in a siddur,
Yes, you will find the 13 principles of Rabbi Shmuel. Right? You get to shul early enough to say it. Right? So it's right there. 13 principles of exegetical interpretation. So Rambam says these people thought that this should be one of the 613. And the Rambam first makes a kind of ad absurdum argument. He says, there are many examples of things where the rabbis darshan the et. Like, for example, it says, Kabed et avicha v'et imecha, honor your parents. So the rabbi said, et l'rabot achicha hagadol. The et comes to teach you that you also have to respect your older brother, your older sister. And the Rambam says, so why don't we Why don't we, include that? I never heard anybody include that. Is that also one of an independent mitzvah or under the category? He says, no, it's a drush of Chazal. So then he turns to the next page and he says, it's clear to him, fourth line from the top, Vehem kulam, all of these drashot of Chazal, like et l'rabot tamir chachamim, or et l'rabot eshet avicha, that you have to respect your father's wife, in addition to respecting your mom. If she gets remarried, you have to respect your father, which is nice, but that's one of the Taryag, says the Rambam, it's not true. Vehem kulam, b'li safek midrabanan, yimnu otam michal mitzvot. Ve'af al pi shepashtei tikra, lo yorel davar miotan, even though the plain sense of the text does not yield that interpretation. V'hu amram zal ein mikra yotzei midei pshuto. So the Rambam says, these people, they are violating a basic principle of biblical exegesis. And the basic principle of biblical exegesis is a phrase, ein mikra yotzei midei pshuto. The text does not leave its meaning. Now this phrase, which we throw around a lot, pshat, for the Rambam came from the Spanish tradition. Okay? What does the word pshat mean? Again, this is a whole other...
Simple.
Yeah, but simple is it's a very loaded term. What is simple? Plain, the plain sense of the text, the simple plain... the word pshat, whatever it means, the Rambam believes that these interpretations, they're not the pshat of the text. And therefore, and for the Rambam, when the Chazal said, Ein mikra yotzei midei pshuto, the text does not leave its plain interpretation. What the Rambam believes is that means, and here he was basing himself on Ibn Ezra and others, that the text has one meaning. Every text has one meaning. When the rabbis said, Ein mikra yotzei midei pshuto, what they meant to say is, the text always means one thing, the pshat. Oh, there are times when the rabbis, by authentic tradition, tell you what the pshat is. It's not that there's a pshat and a different meaning. The rabbis always tell you, in those instances, what the meaning of the text is. And a text means one thing and one thing only. Included in that, one of the ways that I figure out what the text means is the authentic tradition the rabbis taught me. But that's only a very small, limited amount. Most of the texts of the Bible, we follow the plain sense of the text. And when the rabbis made a drash, that's not the plain sense of the text. That is the rabbi's own creative power to take the text and run with it. And those things are not pshat. Now the Rambam says the drashot of Chazal are powerful, they're meaningful, but they're not what the text means. And if they're not what the text means, they don't get counted as one of the 613. One of the six to be in the 613, you have to be what the text actually means. So either it's what the written text means, or what the rabbis by tradition told you the written text means. So an esrog is one of the 613 because the rabbi said Pri Eitz Adar means an esrog. But if the rabbis had not had that by tradition, but had been trying to figure out what it means by drasha, it wouldn't be counted as one of the 613. And now the Rambam says something very important, which also gets back, to the question. V'ulai tachshov. Look at the next bolded part. And if you might think, the Rambam says, "V'ulai tachshov." This is towards the end of the first of the shoresh, and maybe you'll think, "Sha'ani boreach milimnotam," that I am running away from counting these drashot of Chazal, liotan bilti amitiot, because they're not true, because I don't accept them as binding. Veyot hadin hayotzei b'midah hi emet o bilti emet ein za hasiba. That's not the reason. I also believe that you have to honor your father's wife. I also believe you have to honor your older brother. I accept the bindingness of that halacha. I accept the bindingness of that drush of Chazal. It's true. But it's not one of the 613. That's the Rambam's point. It's a classification issue. Aval asiba. The reason it's not one of the 613, and here he uses an amazing image. Ki chol ma sheyotzi adam anafim min hashorashim she'emru l'Moshe b'Sinai b'Biyur v'hem taryaga mitzvot. Because all the things that a person derives out of the law, the Rambam compares the drashat of Chazal to anafim hayotzim min hashorashim. There's a tree. The tree has roots. The roots are the 613. That is what was given at Sinai, and the roots include that which the rabbis received by tradition as what the roots mean. But the fruit, the leaves, and the fruit, and everything that emerges, now those are organically connected to the roots, but they're not what was there when the tree was first born. They emerged from the tree. Says the Rambam, "Va'afilu haya motzi Moshe ba'atzmo." Even if Moshe was the first one to derive that law, but he did it using the power of drasha, he wore his chacham hat rather than his navi hat, rather than being a transmitter of an authentic tradition from God. Ein ra'ui limnotam. It is not appropriate to count them. And therefore the Rambam says, I'm skipping 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. He says, Ubelo safek hayu otam hadinim hamotzim bekal v'chomer bezulato min hamidot alafim rabim. The laws that are derived by drasha reach into the thousands. Forget about 613, they reach into the thousands. Ve'ilu kulam hayu noda'im b'mei Moshe v'nomar alehem ve'elu kulam. And these may have been known to Moses, but only through rabbinic exegesis. V'nomar alehem, we will say about them, dikdukei sofrim. Ki chol ma shelo sham'u b'Sinai b'vei'ur. Whatever they did not hear directly at Sinai, hinehu mi divrei sofrim. They are immediately called divrei sofrim. Hine kvar hitba'er. And now the Rambam summarizes his position. Hine kvar hitba'er. It now becomes clear. Ki taryag mitzvot shenemru lo l'Moshe b'Sinai. The 613 that were said to Moses at Sinai. Lo yimne bahem kol ma sheyilmad b'shloshes midot. Will only include that which was said to Moses directly at Sinai. Lo yimna bahem kol ma sheyilmad b'shloshes midot vafilu bizmano alav hashalom. But we will not count that which was derived by exegesis, even those derived by exegesis in his own day. So even though historically Moses acted as a chacham, those laws are not counted as part of the Taryag. Kol shekain, certainly, shelo yimna bahem kol ma shehotzi ba'acharit hazman. Certainly not that which the rabbis derived much later in time. Aval omnam, but what we will count, ma shehaya beferush mikubal mimenu, anything that was transmitted in authentic tradition, v'hu shivaru hama'atikim, and that which was explained by the transmitters, Chazal, v'yomru, when they say shezeh hadavar asur la'asoto v'isuro doraita. If the rabbis explicitly in the Talmud say this is prohibited and it was a doraita, O yomru shehu guf Torah, or if the rabbis say that this is part of the essence of what the Torah means, Priyet Sadar means an esrog, hine nimnaoto, then we will count it. Kihu noda b'Kabbalah, because we have knowledge of it by tradition and not by hekesh. and not by Hekesh is one of the drashot, one of the examples of exegetical principles. Ve'omnam, but it's true. Zachru ha'Hekeshbo, they sometimes will mention the Hekesh as an example of a drasha. Ve'viu ha'raya lav b'achat mishlosh midot laharot chochmat hakatuv. And the only reason was to show us the wisdom, the great wisdom of the text, that it can yield that connection. And this very interesting book, which is about this topic as well, Misinai L'Lishkat HaGazit. So he has a wonderful...
Who is the author?
His name is Shlomo Kassir and Shlomo Glicksberg, two scholars in Israel. So they cite an interesting tshuva, a responsa of Rambam in this context, which I did not know about until I read this book. And Rambam writes a tshuva to to Rav Pinchas Hadayan, and listen to the language of the Rambam. It's even more, it's almost clear. The Rambam, let's see if I can find it.
I'm feeling sorrier and sorrier about poor Moshe.
Okay. So Rambam writes in this tshuva, this is in Shuta Rambam, the responsive Rambam Siman Shin Nun He, 355 in the Freiman edition. She'ein kol davar shelamedim oto bekal v'chomer o b'gzeira shava o b'midah mishlosh esrei midot she'Torah nidreshet behem. No thing which is derived by one of the exegetical principles, hu din Torah, is a biblical law, ad sheyomru chachamim b'ferush u'min Torah. Until the rabbis tell you that it was really biblical, which means that the hekesh or the drasha is just window dressing, and it's not really the source of the law. And listen to the Rambam. Afilu davar shehu halacha l'Moshe miSinai. Even that which was orally transmitted by God to Moshe, but has no connection to the biblical text. Right? That's the second category of the Rambam. Midivrei sofrim karinan le. We call that midivrei sofrim. Ve'ein min haTorah ela davar shehu miforash baTorah. Only that which is explicit in the Torah, in the text of the Torah. Kigon shatnez v'kilayim v'shabbat v'arayot. O davar she'amru chachamim shehu min haTorah. V'hein kimo shlosha arba'a dvarim bilvad. And this refers to 3 or 4 things alone. So either what's explicit in the Torah, or that which the rabbis tell us is minan Torah. Wow. So for the Rambam, it's a very high bar to reach that. Now, let me give you one more. And Josh, afterwards, can you put, I was running late for my conference, so I Xeroxed for the people here, but I didn't Xerox it. So if you could put these 2 pages, I'll send it to you. I'll scan it and send it to you. So if you look at the second page of the passages I started with today, if you look on the right-hand side, you see a chart. For the Rambam, what is the Oraita and what is the Rabbanan? Don't look at the left-hand side, that we'll talk about next week, the Ramban. The Rambam says, Hakatuv, what is the Oraita in this chart? That which is in the text. HaPerush HaMekubal MiSinai, the authentically passed on tradition. Midrash Halacha HaMekayem, which is a phrase in Hebrew which means a Midrash Halacha, a rabbinic exegesis which is just coming to support that which they already knew by tradition. What the Rambam calls Michochmat HaKatuv. And the Rambam includes the principle that you have to listen to the rabbis. Okay? What is rabbinic? What is called D'Rabbanan? So Halacha L'Moshe MiSinai, anything that was given to Moshe at Sinai, but is not interpreting the Bible. Moshe is acting in the role of a rabbi passing on that material. Midrash halacha hayotzer, the creative rabbinic exegesis. The creative rabbinic exegesis which yields most of the law. The words of the prophets when they introduce new laws. And takanot, gzerot, and minhagot. The takanos, the legislation, the fences around the law, the minhagim, these are all rabbinic as well. And they're all under the obligation to listen to the rabbis. Lo tasur, you have to listen ala mishpat sheyomru lecha, lo lecha taseh, you have to listen to what they say to you. Now I want to finish with a wonderful image of Professor Halbertal in terms of philosophy of law. For the Rambam, and that'll set us up for next week for the Ramban and some closing remarks. For the Rambam, it turns out that the drashot of Chazal are what's called in Hebrew hesek logi, meaning it is a derivation, a logical derivation rather than an interpretation of the text. Right? For the Rambam, a text has only one meaning, and it means what the pshat, what the plain sense. The rabbis sometimes tell you what the, but stam, the rabbi is creating new law. That's new, and he gives an interesting, and he makes a big deal about that image. The anafim min hashorashim, the leaves or the branches that emerge from the trunk, from the roots. And Professor Halbertal gives an example. He says, let's say you had a law that said that no vehicles are allowed to go into a gan tziburi, into a park. Okay, let's say like in New York Central Park, sometimes they have signs, no vehicles allowed. So, as a legislator, or or a court or legalist, you have to interpret two things in that sense. What's a vehicle, and what is a park, right? So, what exactly? Does it include bicycles? Does it include scooters?
Wheelchair.
Does it include motorized wheelchairs? Does it include, right? You have to determine what does it mean? So that's an interpretative question. I have to know, what does the word vehicle include? Does it include this? Does it include that? That's like a perush hamikupal misinai. I have to know, what exactly does it mean? What are you shaking your head?
I'm amazed.
Yeah, okay. But then there's a second stage. There's another dimension. When I come and I want to then yield a logical extension of this law and say, whatever you define vehicles as, right, it's also forbidden, and I will derive from this law that it's also forbidden to bring vehicles into the playground of a school. And I'll use a kal v'chomer. If you can't bring in vehicles into a public park because you may run people over, so certainly where there's children who are not as careful in a public school, you're certainly going to be forbidden. That's already a kal v'chomer, right? I went from one logically to another. It's clear that the word public park meant public park, but I am using a logical derivation of the intent of the lawgiver to extend by kal v'chomer what the law, and it's a good law, and it makes sense. What I'm trying to do here, and therefore, it could be a very legitimate law that is derived, but it may not be what the original law actually said. That's not what the original, it may be pregnant in the original law, but it's not what the law actually said, but it's a wonderful logical extension of the, so that's what he wants to say here.
In a sense, it's a corollary of
Exactly. And that's what Halbertal wants to say. There's the shorashim, which is like the first part, defining what a vehicle is. So I have to know, what is a priyet sadar? What is an ot al yadecha? What is this? What is that? That's the first. And then the second level is, What can I derive from the implicit principle inherent in this case? Okay? That is the Rambam's conception, philosophy of law, and the Rambam's conception of the drashot and what the text means. In Yirtzeh Hashem next week, we will spend the first half discussing the Ramban's conception of the law. And then if we have time, then we'll go into the topic of the authority of Beit Din and how that shapes the process of law according to the various thinkers.
Thank you so much.
Thank
Very
you and have a
interesting.
wonderful week.
Thank you.
In the Gemara, there are arguments in terms of what a particular pasuk, what's the law of a particular pasuk.
Correct.
So they also say it can only have one
Meaning, right.
One meaning.
Correct.
Even in
This
the
is
Gemara,
right.
not
Well, we're
just
going to see the Ramban takes issue with that. So please bring these...